Welcome to Catalytic Curiosity. I am your host, Jaymes with a Y O'Farron with Catalytic Conversations. I serve remote professionals and hybrid organizations with coaching, consulting, and training to help them reconcile humanity and technology, leading to healthier, digitally integrated lives and teams. On this podcast, I am embarking on a journey of discovery to unearth the roots of digital mastery and maturity beyond mere adulting. I interview insightful and intriguing experts exploring how we can develop sage-like maturity with intention in today's digitized world. Today's episode brings Lira Kay to the table to talk about identity and digital wellness and addiction and many things like that. Lira Kay is an international artist, futurist, and celebrity guide. She's been called a secret weapon behind the sanity and phenomenal success of prominent social and creative enterprises and their CEOs. For the past 30 years, she led global public projects and had mentored and trained the professional and spiritual elite around the globe, while bringing up 5 daughters, traveling the world, and running a business. Her latest body of work addresses the post-pandemic corporate and social dynamics and offers radical solutions to uplift morale and increase performance and productivity fast. During our conversation, we talked about addictions and how it relates to unhealthy engagement with digital environments. We talked about raising children in the modern world. We talked about how important a strong sense of identity is and how we can safely explore different communities and different sources of identity without leading to toxic behaviors. There's a lot of stuff to cover in this episode. It was an amazing conversation. So strap in and join us for the ride. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Catalytic Curiosity. I'm here today with Lira Kay, an awesome gal that I have met online and that we really connected together. She reached out to me. She saw my podcast and wanted to have a conversation with me about some of the stuff that we talk about here. So, Lira, could you introduce yourself and talk about what you do, what's your passion, and what you feel is the particular intersection with my podcast here?
All right. So my name is Lira Kay, and I'm a founder of School of Inspired Life and a futuristic project that is called Meaningful Trends. And I've just finished the 111 Healers Conference that I've been also running for a couple of years prior to that. So I'm a futurist. I do a lot of things. I've led a global sort of creative projects, community projects for like 30 years. Done a lot of workshops, done a lot of interviews, created a lot of content, and of course I mentor, I teach. That is kind of things that I do on the, all the time. Mm-hmm. And of course, in my business, I work with corporations, with organizations, and taking the message of healing, the message of high performance. I'm big on how can we improve now, and there are some people I think are more capable than others, and I think, like from my perspective, of working now with thousands of people around the world, I'm thinking that my investment is good with people who are in the leadership positions, and I can really help them to be a better leaders. Because, obviously, I talk a lot about this power versus control. Sometimes we have people in control who don't have true authority or power.
Right.
And I find that it's, it's helping if people in sort of, controlling leadership positions could actually have real authority, right, and could really influence with love, with compassion, with power.
So when you have the title, you have the positional authority. It's not, It doesn't automatically give you the influence. It doesn't automatically give you people's trust in any way, exactly, or authority or influence in that way. But you do have the responsibility to make sure that you do gain that and connect with people that creates that influence. That's really awesome. I love that. So you mentioned you're a futurist and looking forward. So you like technology and things like this, but you also, we've talked a little bit, you see some of the challenges that we face when we're dealing with technology. Could you talk a little bit more about what do you see as some of the big challenges with people using technology, and what are some of the pitfalls that we fall into?
All right. Well, I think technology is a huge part of progress. Obviously, I think it's necessary. I think it's not a question of is it good or bad. It's a question of how do we really use it in a healthy ways. That's
Absolutely.
All. And then, of course, as from my research, I'm seeing that we're gonna have pretty much a different world that we're going to be living in. And through my Meaningful Trends series that I've been interviewing people, and especially people who are working with artificial intelligence, and they're talking about some, sort of kind of a science fiction like utopian or dystopian sometimes reality, right? So very, very interesting of where our world is going. And of course, the kind of problems we're going to be solving in a very near future. And I think some of it is already happening right now. For example, we have ability to connect with people from around the world, right?
Like right now, Hawaii to Fargo.
I'm in Hawaii. You are in, where are you in South
Fargo,
Dakota?
North Dakota. Fargo, North Dakota.
North Dakota, right? So it's like we are, in different sort of continents, if you want, and we are still connecting. So that's the beauty of this. And at the same time, this is also, especially the past 2 years where we couldn't really travel or connect personally, we became completely like kind of adjusted to that digital communication and world. And we thought this is probably a normality now. And with that, we can't deny that statistics for anxiety and depression also skyrocketed among population. So, and it's everywhere, especially in a more digitalized sort of communities, right?
Absolutely.
So we know that that's a problem, right? So because anxiety and depression is not pleasant to live with, and it's leads to all sorts of, problems, right?
Absolutely. Professional, personal life across the board, it cripples our ability to do everything effectively.
Exactly. So it's undeniable that the more digitalized we become, there is some kind of a problem going to start happening inside, right?
There's something awry, but we also see people who are able to engage with technology in a healthy way. The outliers that don't fall prey to the anxiety and the depression and the burnout. So there must be a way to do it right. So we can actually explore that and find that distinction. But we also realize that, the default ways that the majority of us are using technology are leading down these negative, destructive paths. And I know in my research and my experience working in addictions ministry, before I went into coaching, I had done a lot of research into that and studying, addictions recovery and things like that. And I started seeing a lot of corollaries between addiction and burnout. And then in our preaching, we were talking, you also brought up that correlation of addiction with the unhealthy use of technology. Could you explore your insights of addiction and how it relates to this whole concept and issue?
Yeah, very interesting. There was this question you asked me, I think, before we came for the podcast. You asked me, like, well, kind of generally what could save people from
right. Right.
And I said, and I thought about it quite a bit, like, what's the shortest possible answer? And my shortest possible answer is that people need to develop a strong sense of identity or spiritual core, or whatever that is. I mean, spiritual, very broad sense, that you know who you are and you know where you stand, and you can ground yourself, in your world. Because ultimately addiction is a manifestation of our desire to escape reality. And when we are escaping reality, we are not escaping reality out there, we're escaping our internal reality. Right. I'm trying not to see or not to feel or not to be, while I'm participating in all sorts of different activities that can take me away from it. And that would include, of course, social media. It could include, what is it? Work. I used to be a workaholic. So I really understand
that's really common.
If you have somewhat sort of traumatized or troublesome sort of past, you will have some tendencies and just a natural, maybe that's going to be your coping mechanisms, is to escape through some kind of other activity. It's called, you are replacing feelings of being with yourself with something that is external, something that that takes you away from experiencing the anxiety or depression or whatever there is.
Trying to regain a sense of control over your sense of identity in a sense.
Exactly. And of course, living in a digital world, though, though in an abstract way is overwhelming, on a very personal level actually does give you a sense of control. It is your little profile, it is your little post, it is your little likes, it's your little feed, it's you can
it's your little dopamine hits.
You control. You do all of those things to others and to yourself that brings you that sense of, well, I guess I am sort of a little bit in charge. So of course it's a temptation. And then of course, what's the solution? Solution is, and you mentioned those outliers of people who are not specifically suffering with any consequences of being on I don't know, social media or being in a digital world or you know, sort of living in that virtual reality. I think it's because they do have a strong sense of self and they are not confusing and they using you know, all the sort of benefits of technology just as a tool, not as a that is my only reality, this is where I kind of feed and this is where that's all there is and that's what I depend on now. Right.
I love that way you put it. I use that phrase a lot. You know, technology needs to be a tool, not our entire reality. I like to say that it needs to extend our humanity instead of replace it. When we have a strong sense of core and identity, when we're able to relate to people authentically, then that technology can extend that capacity to reach out, like say, to all the way to Hawaii or around the world. We can extend that skill of being able to connect authentically, and it doesn't disrupt it. But like you're saying, if we have a dysfunctional sense of identity and we're grasping wildly for any sense of control in our lives, then technology is going to exacerbate that instead and become a coping mechanism and become this false sense of reality that leads to all these negative impacts. So what are some of the ways that you've seen this spiral out of control? What are some particular symptoms that you've seen when people are like, how do I know if I'm dealing with technology in an addictive way rather than a healthy way? What are some ways that you would raise from your expertise to help people see that for themselves?
So majority of work, for example, I do is on, you know, is in digital world, right? So it is work for me. So personally, I don't count hours. I don't sit there thinking that if I didn't spend hours off the computer, for example, that means anything. What I'm looking for in my own personal life, and when I'm observing somebody else, maybe I'm looking at the attitude they have towards it, dependency.
Yes.
What else do they have? What else do I think was it Jordan Peterson, I think he said something like, if you have like a just generally good life, like you have, you wake up for your job or whatever you're doing there, you make your money, you have some kind of a family, some kind of close relationships in your life, you're somewhat healthy, somewhat fit, like you're okay. Well, that's good. Well, I find that is
good baseline.
If the baseline is good, like if you are functional and everything's fine and you're somewhat, you know, somewhat happy, because we can't be always happy, but we are whatever living our life, you know, as we are. And then time you spend on in the digital reality world, I don't think it matters so much. I don't think that's specifically how you would identify a problem. I think also something to look for, and probably already predict and know, that when people do go through their own personal identity crises that could happen, like, I mean, they should happen at least once, twice, maybe 3 or more times in your lifetime. The longer we live, the more we're going to be you know, sort of,
it's a natural part of our life cycle,
right? We're gonna lose the, you know, parts of us, and we're gonna try to create something and have those makeovers, have those sort of questions: who am I, where I'm going with this, right? And that's the time maybe when we are most vulnerable to the outside validation. We are looking for, so what does the world see of us? What do they see? What do they say? And maybe this is the time of, or let's say a dangerous time, when people are looking for this from social media or somewhere. And I'm specifically thinking of children. Now, our children who are, or where is the biggest problem, or at least we sense as parents, as sort of adults, that, oh my gosh, that could be a problem there. If we're looking at kids endlessly involved on social media and trying to seek those likes and trying to be popular online and so on. Well, because they are going through the biggest and the first identity crisis there is.
They don't have like any kind of prior reference point to realize that when I have an identity crisis, I'll survive. That's their first one.
This is the first one. This is the first one. It's teenage years when you because as a little kid, before you become hit puberty, pretty much you are very content with your own parents and what they tell you, you're a good boy, you're a good girl. So it's all good. Yeah. It starts with puberty when we are separating from our parents. It's a biological reason why we need to do that. And once we did that, we're now looking to our peers. We're looking because biologically we are wired now to look for a mate, like we're looking to a partner to create those real connections with somebody, and we are becoming dependent on the how people perceive us. And of course, I think social media exploits that, and of course provides kids or provides young people all sorts of ways to keep them on those platforms, because this is where they're looking for to be validated, to be seen, to be understood. Right. So and there we are now dealing with with young minds who don't know any better and completely relying on social media. And unfortunately, it could end not in a great way. I've personally had witnessed, because my kids I have kids from 24-year-old to 12-year-old.
Oh, nice.
I see kind of how they're growing up and what are the different reasons why teenagers can go through hard times with their peers socially. And the younger they are, the more social media plays into it, and the more, unfortunately, tragic cases that I've heard of, right? Like bullying online and suicides and stuff like that. It's very, very sad that we're coming to this, and parents right now are concerned and they don't really know how to deal with it, because if you take it away, this is the only playground kids have right now. That's and it is a personal dilemma for me as well. As a parent, I'm looking, should I be like taking it away? Should I be letting them play, because they need to learn somehow? So it's a big question.
It is.
But I see the dangers right there for us.
I love how you put several points in there, because one of the things that I believe strongly is that we gain our sense of identity primarily through the communities that we are engaged in. The rituals of belonging that we perform attaches us to the communities, and they provide us that validation in a sense. So the most powerful self-determination choice that we can make is choosing which communities we are choosing to identify with and belong with. It's like you mentioned, talking about when you have a good, healthy baseline, you have a strong sense of community around your family, right? And they're shaping you. And then as you grow up and you start breaking away from that, you're looking out to find what other communities are going to give me a sense of validation. And the default that's thrust upon us is the general maelstrom of a algorithmically generated connection network on social media. It's not something that's intentionally chosen or curated for us. It's not something that we've carefully selected who are going to be influencing us. We haven't put ourselves into a particular place where our peers are vetted in a way that makes sure that we're going to be going in the right direction. So we just have this random chaos that's then defining us in some ways. So we end up with all kinds of weird dysfunctions in our identity. And so choosing carefully the ways that we engage with community so that we can bridge these transitions and find a sense of identity. So we're the ones who are determining which communities are actually helping shape us, I think is so important for that. So what are your thoughts about that? It's like, how do we solve this in a sense of exploring the online to extend our sense of community and our sense of identity in a healthy way? How do we have self-determination there?
So this is just very, very latest research I've done. So it's a little bit it's in the air. Because I don't have enough information to talk about. But one of the things that I'm sort of seeing experts talking about is that actually how not random that you know, the invitation for the kids to join communities. Actually, it is quite manipulated, if you want. So it's an interesting idea, right? That actually it's not so random, right? Our kids are kind of taken to certain ways and certain navigated and suggested certain things.
Like self-reinforcing patterns that people fall into these particular ruts, in a sense.
It's kind of, there is a, I think that is not a new idea, that whenever there is some kind of a freedom existing in a society, or there are, let's say, a young mind that is kind of walking around looking, where am I gonna, where do I belong, right? There will be on the other side, right? People who would be interested in taking them to come to my tribe, believe in my things, right? So this is natural stuff. This is not a new thing, right?
As old as people.
Exactly. This is like old as world, right?
Yeah.
So in a way, our kids right now, there's no difference, except maybe what does drive people who want to have the possession of young minds, like what drives them? So that's an sort of interesting question, and we just hope and pray that they have some freaking good intentions there, right? Because sometimes you wonder, right? So anyway, but one of the things also that I think unfolds very naturally, and this is what I'm noticing even from my own personal experience, is that when a kid comes from your family environment, they will look for the opposite of where they're coming from. This is a psychological phenomenon. We rebel, and we rebel against where we come from.
Yeah.
So in that sense, when you're looking at the young sort of teenager looking to where to belong, you can expect that they will look for something that is going to be opposing probably the parents' ideology or the traditions and values that were cultivated and nurtured in the environment. So in a way, social media, I think, it's not just social media, let's say digital reality, digital world, is actually a very interesting sort of playground, because you can find any tribe you want.
Literally anything. Good or bad.
Good or bad. And of course, what is good or bad depends on, like the parents sit there and they say, I have this like personal funny story. I'm coming from, my mom is sort of very, she's of this medical degree, and my father is a famous artist. So this sort of very bohemian sort of artistic lifestyle, very creative. So in my life, I was bombarded with two, I would say, completely kind of opposite messaging, right? And there was an interesting sort of story to tell. Like my father, for example, disowned my brother for going to have a job, because he thought that to have a job, it's like beneath you, like how dare you, we're artists here, right? Can you imagine, right? So imagine, right, the ideology, right, that comes, so we can perceive our values, our ideas and how life works, what's good or bad from our own perspective. And then our kids will inevitably break free and try out something that was a taboo, something that was forbidden, forbidden fruit, if you want. So of course parents would be disappointed and would be against our, the offspring's going out and like literally showing that, okay, I'm against everything you just gave me, right? So it's very, very interesting. I find it interesting as well that, like in with my own kids as well, it's like my kids had very sort of free, very liberal upbringing, and always do what you want and explore. And when right now I'm looking at how they are really sort of developing and what they are trying to do, I can see when they rebel when they're going into something much more traditional, much more
right.
And I'm like, but because I already know that, I'm not panicking. I'm just like, okay, this is the phase, because you have to show you have to kind of break free.
Explore the contrasts in a sense.
You have to explore the contrast. So it's a part of the growth for the young kids, and not just young kids, for anybody. I think we always, as adults, we develop, and we will try out, sort of quite opposite, maybe sometimes things, depending on how brave and daring we are.
Right.
But I think it is healthy, and I think actually digital world does maybe give you an opportunity to at least, tip your toes into some kind of a industry area, or what's not, community value system, or what's not, sort of fiddle there without maybe too much damage, and withdraw and maybe try something else. So I feel like the question of identity always going to be there. I think millennials are predicted to live until 100 years, right? So we're talking about very different ways they're going to be perceiving marriages, like relationships. Nobody's going to expect you to have just one marriage throughout 100 years, right? Or one career or one education. No, we're going to
different challenges.
We're going to be looking for
a lot more mobile.
You. just because we have so much time on our hands.
Right.
And that means having a digital life, I think it does give you that opportunity to have somewhat sort of normality, somewhat healthy baseline, while you at the same time exploring yourself and your gifts and your ideas and your desires digitally, without damaging the body.
So in a sense, like, to explore these different potential identities by intentionally, like you said, dipping your toe into different communities with different contrasts with where you're at, to see more of what they're like and explore them carefully. And I think that caution and that care is really valuable, because that's one of the challenges, like we mentioned earlier with addiction. So much of the problem with addictions is that you're reactive. You're running away. You're defining yourself by not doing something, right? And so the converse, of course, is being proactive. Like, I want to go positively seek out something good, right? And so instead of fleeing away from a negative thing or something we dislike, and this whatever happens to come in front of us is the opposite of whatever that is, being intentional and helping people take a break. It's like, it's okay if you experiment. It's okay if you try something different, but be intentional about it. Be careful about it. Explore in a cautious way without getting so deep into it you can hurt yourself. I think is a really cool way to use in a sense, using the level of natural disconnect that's online, the kind of the disinhibition, kind of the veil or the muffled aspect, in a sense, of communication, as a veil to protect us from things that might potentially be dangerous, in a sense. I think it's a really cool way of looking at it. What are some other ways that we can explore and like try out these different kinds of things without falling prey to the toxic aspects that are just outright like the actually destructive behaviors and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because how can we? In ideal world, yes. I tell you, this whole idea about being able to explore, create, and live out our multiple identities, or desire for multiple identities, came to me through actually having like a dream. I slept, had a dream, and I saw. And I always have those interesting dreams about the future. That's why I'm futurist, because I feel like I actually, visualized, I've seen them. And this is how it was just quite recent. I had a dream when I saw that in the future, quite distant future, we have two separate worlds. One is here on Earth, and it was sustainable, healthy, minimalist lifestyle. Super minimalist, very sustainable, small communities, like sort of, healthy people, like happy people as well. And there is a whole digital cloud hanging above the earth where all the stuff is happening, which is what? Creativity. This is all people, what people also are. We're humans, we have the mind, right?
Yeah.
So the mind things are there. We have politics, we have creativity, we have innovation, we have what is it, expression, self-expression, arts, like everything is all there. But the interesting thing that I saw is that it doesn't damage the planet. It doesn't damage our physical body. And that was like a wow. Oh, that's actually I would take a digital world like that. If so right now we don't have that. We have a kid on social media, didn't get enough likes or had some hate, and they can go potentially do something bad to themselves or maybe even to others, right?
Yeah.
So we don't have the protection. We don't have that. Yeah. It's all interconnected. I think, and that's why I'm talking about this kind of base, the spiritual core. I'm talking about some kind of like basic human values, like
an anchor in a sense.
Like, yeah, somehow, how can we perhaps give it to, like program, install it to our people?
We can't escape the metaphors.
How can we sort of like somehow give it to our kids and say, well, life is important. Human life, human body is important. Like this is the only thing you've got right now.
It's just not all digital. It's like we are physical beings, and we need to think and act as physical beings.
And this is where, when I'm working, because I train a lot of like very advanced psychotherapists in innovative therapies, and encourage them to create new therapies in the world and put them out there. And this is one of the things I'm talking about, is how do you identify that? How do you notice that people, where do people kind of stray from that, the good path, which reassures the survival of humanity, right? Together, like how do you recognize it, and what do you do? What's the and we kind of go from there. And of course it's so it is a question. It is looking into this. Like, I mean, I personally see and invite people to start taking action. If you see any neglect of your physical reality, this is probably the best diagnostic
indicator tool.
You see, okay, well, the girl or boy is not eating, not sleeping, then they're not walking, they're not talking, they're not communicating, they're not they're
not exercising, their room is a mess.
That's right.
Their physical reality around them is starting to unravel. That means they've gotten completely locked up in the digital.
Yes
That's a really good indicator.
And on the other hand, and this is kind of because I'm very specialized when I teach, so I'm working with people, like I said, those are like advanced psychotherapists. So we're looking at, on the other hand, what is out there that encourages people to neglect their physicality, their body. Because part of my passion and what that was a question I remember. I thought, I should tell you. I should tell you what I'm passionate about.
Absolutely.
I'm really passionate about social psychospiritual dynamics.
Okay.
So I'm very passionate about how what is coming out there, what is the messaging out there, whether it's psychological, emotional, or spiritual, that affects and influences the masses, right? The social dynamics, which is, starts from your family, any relationships, really, and of course goes into corporations, organizations, and politics, and so on, nations. So we grow from there, but it starts right here. It starts with, can this child speak with another and be comprehensive and be as normal as, let's say, healthy. I'm not even saying, because what's normality, right? That's not even a question. But let's say just, physically healthy. And I feel, this is just my opinion, that if you see anything that is out there that destroys that, or suggests that that's not important, that you can just fly away, you're an alien, or what's not. Like, there's a lot of things out there when I'm looking at and I'm just like, wow, I don't want like my kids to participate in that or believe that neglecting your physical body or not caring about your physicality is an option.
Yeah.
So that is kind of what I'm looking at as a baseline and maybe a criteria. If you're a parent or if you are in any kind of position of leadership and want to establish and understand, is it dangerous? Is it not? Like, what are they doing there? Is it like, should I encourage or not? Or yourself, if you are a creator, publisher of content, educational maybe content that teaches people maybe about spirituality or I would say spirituality maybe, or ideology, then yes, be aware that people are people, we're humans, and we need first of all to have a life, and then everything else
extends
that, which is intellectual sort of playground and all of those things that we want to feel while we are online, right? We want to feel, experience life. This is great. As soon as our bodies are still intact and healthy.
It's like making sure that I love that intellectual playground analogy where we have our locus of identity of self here with our bodies, physicality, right? And that environment around us is healthy and ordered and sane, right? And then when we have that, like that platform, like a firm foundation, we can then erect upon that intellectual playground of the digital world in a safe way. Because then we can make forays out into all these different communities and explore and test the waters and connect with people in a safe way, because we have that strong foundation from which to operate, in a sense.
Yeah. So if we are on Twitch, for example, live streaming, we do take time to go to the bathroom, eat something,
Yes, please.
As simple as that. Everything else, I feel, is, of course, go express yourself. Absolutely. Just make sure you're not dying in the process.
Right.
That's all there is. And of course, if you're an adult and let's say you created some relationships in family, kids, well, then you have more responsibilities. And I feel like almost in the future, people will have that. They will decide and they will be much more aware and maybe intentional about having relationships. Hopefully they will choose to have the relationship.
Fair.
Because they might not to. This is what again, the research shows that our future generations will have less intimacy, less sex, less marriages, less families, just because it's an option now. Because I can get everything I want from my digital reality.
There's less of a direct drive towards that. We're not funneled towards that necessity as much. Yeah,
absolutely. And now we can talk about intimacy, and we can talk about how that, and
how perceptions will change.
Don't want intimacy, and so there's a whole conversation about that.
Yeah, totally. So as we wrap things up, this has been an amazing conversation. What are some last thoughts that you have, touching on like identity, addiction, managing our physicality in balance with our digital playground, and all these different community, all these different aspects that we've touched on? What are some final thoughts that you have that you'd like to circle back to or highlight or touch on?
Yeah. Well, one of maybe the biggest things when I'm thinking, what's the message for people is, well, first of all, we started with this, addiction, why people would want to escape reality, or their physicality. Well, because we think that we're not perfect, because we have unacceptable, troublesome thoughts about ourselves. Ultimately, right now, I'm sure that's not going to disappear. We live in a world that is judgmental. There is a lot of judgment, and there is a lot of outside sort of voices that would tell you, well, that's not good about you. You should be this way. You should be that way. So in a way, all our disappointment or frustration with ourselves, and this is why we're trying not to be there, because we don't feel good about ourselves, we don't feel comfortable. I think this all can be changed with healing, with just actually learning the principle of healing, which is how can you validate yourself and accept yourself just as you are. And the more we do it on a very fundamental level as an ideology, can we have a very sort of ideology of, hey, it's all good. It's all good. Everything you do, all your shadows, all your whatever aspirations, it's all acceptable. It's acceptable. You don't have to shame yourself for who you are. And that gives people that maybe baseline, like sort of some, I can ground in myself, and I'm not afraid of myself. If I see something, okay, that's not perfect, okay, I can improve or not. It's like up to me what I'm going to do with this. But at least I'm not trying to escape. I'm not living in that shame, which is often why people don't, have addictions, because they just can't bear it. What's there if I just going to sit with myself? So I would invite people maybe to begin with that. Assure that if you are a parent yourself and you are maybe, in charge of some young minds, how can you help them to not to be so dependent on other people's opinions about you?
Yeah.
And have some like this baseline that, fundamentally I'm okay. Like I'm okay. I'm okay.
Avoid the condemnation.
And I think if that is where you're starting from, then my invitation is, yes, then go explore. Because digital world it's a miracle. It's amazing that we have access, and it's amazing that we can create endlessly and innovate endlessly, and that we can express ourselves endlessly. Because this is, I think, as on a spiritual level, as souls, this is our desire as humans, not just to be physical, not just to eat and sleep and make babies, but it is about creativity. It's about doing something interesting and in a collaboration with others. So in digital reality gives us that opportunity. So I would invite people to ground in themselves, find that peace with themselves. You are okay. It's not so bad. It's not okay. You can bear it. You can love it. And then from there, go and play.
Yeah, I love that so much, because I've seen that one of the dysfunctions we see on the digital world so much is the false comparisons. So we see all the perfections and none of the mistakes. And we see all of our own mistakes, and that we go like, oh, I must be broken in some way. I must be more broken than everybody else, at least. But seeking out and connecting with people in a way that lets people share their vulnerabilities, see like, oh, other people make mistakes too. I'm not that different, right? Is so important for having that humility, to be able to accept, like, I don't have to be completely perfect in everything I do.
I always say to everybody, like, I'm not perfect, you're not perfect. That's not even a question.
That's not the issue. Right. I love it.
Let's move on to something.
let's find another focus. Well, thank you so much, Lira. This has been an amazing conversation. Everybody, make sure you check out the notes for where to find out what she's doing in the show notes, because she has some really cool stuff going on. Thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Jaymes. That was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had your curiosity sparked to explore these subjects with greater awareness, or gained a valuable insight along the way. Take a look at the show notes for links for where you can connect with Lira and what she's up to. Leave reviews wherever you can, and make sure to join the conversation on my Discord. Remember, community is the catalyst that drives lasting transformation. I'll see you in the next episode of Catalytic Curiosity.